Hello and welcome to WILDCOAST MPA Ambassador Training video. We're standing here today in the Matlahuayl State Marine Reserve, one of 124 MPAs or marine protected areas in the state of California. Here in the Matlahuayl State Marine Reserve, this is a no-take reserve, which is part of the reason why we see such an abundance of wildlife. This training video is to be used as a tool for new guides and outfitters and help best convey MPA information to the public.
I'm a PhD student at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. I study quantitative fisheries ecology in the Simmons Lab. I moved to San Diego for undergrad and basically came to UC San Diego because of its affiliation with Scripps, because I was interested in marine biology. As I was finishing my undergrad, I wasn't really sure what the next step for me was, and I wanted to stay in San Diego and I needed a job. So I figured might as well work on the beach for the summer. And that's when I started working as a kayak guide. When I applied was like, yeah, I have a degree in marine biology. I know a lot about what's happening out there, and I'm comfortable on the water. But I think that's the biggest thing when companies are looking for guides. Their number one concern is safety. Literally thousands of people come to the reserve every year and are experiencing the ocean. So it's this enormous outreach opportunity to get people excited about the marine world. And that's why it's so important that people are giving out factual, accurate information, because this is the opportunity to introduce people to why we should be protecting it. People who work in the reserve have a responsibility to give out information that's accurate and informative to the public that doesn't necessarily interact with this marine resource on a regular basis. Don't make stuff up. If you don't know the answer, say that you don't know the answer. Matlahuayl means land of many holes in the Kumeyaay language. They chose this name because of the cultural significance of this area to the Kumeyaay people, and part of the reason the reserve was established was not only to protect the ecosystem, but also to protect the cultural significance of the area to the indigenous people. There are cultural artifacts in the reserve which are protected from take through the establishment of the marine protected area. Matlahuayl is bounded on the north end by the Scripps Pier, south to Point La Jolla, which is, you can see it if you're standing on the coast looking to the south. It's not surprising to me that it is a marine park. I don't know if I've ever experienced a place the same as that. It's so easily accessible to the public. I never had a situation where I needed to report anything, but it was something that I would say at the beginning of all my tours, like, hey, if you find a cool shell, you find something while we're out here, please don't take it. Like, the point of the reserve is to leave everything as it is. As kayak guides, you're spending countless hours out on the water and you're seeing things that a casual visitor to the reserve wouldn't normally see. So I definitely think that's part of the responsibility of being someone who uses the reserve so frequently, that if you do see something illegal happening, you should report it. My tour, like all of the tours, starts at the boat launch. You head straight out, get your group together, give them a brief intro to the reserve, and then you start heading south along over by the marine room. Hopefully you find some leopard sharks. And then you keep heading south along the cliffs until you get to the north-facing cliffs. And then you go along there and you can talk about the caves and things like that. And then you get to the clam, and hopefully if the conditions are right, you can get people into the clam. And then back towards the boat launch. Sandy bottom habitats are home to a lot of different organisms. Usually it's highly mobile things, so you get a lot of rays and guitarfish, things that like to burrow in the sand, and things that can swim away pretty quickly if they're in danger. So for stingrays and a lot of other things that live there, sand is a perk because it's loose enough that they can burrow down into it, and it's easy camouflage for them. Because so many things burrow in the sand, a lot of things are specialized to eat things that burrow. Like the leopard sharks, their mouths are located on the bottom of their head, and that's largely to be able to rustle out things that are burrowed in the sand. Most of the individuals that you see are actually pregnant females, and they're thought to come here because the warm water provides desirable conditions during this part of their pregnancy, but also provides refuge from males and an easily accessible nearby food source in the canyons. The sandy seafloor connects the more complex habitats within the reserve. The Rose Canyon fault line runs from up on top of the cliffs down into the reserve, into the canyons. And you can see there's 3 palm trees that are kind of sinking into the ground right at that corner, and that's where the Rose Canyon fault line is. Generally, when the shore starts to turn rocky is when the underwater habitat is starting to turn rocky as well. The rocky reef is different from the sandy bottom because it has a lot of organisms that are better adapted to seeking shelter in rocky crevices and things like that. So whereas at the sandy bottom you have things that burrow, in the rocky reef you have things that like to hide in holes and in crevices. So that's like lobsters, the California spiny lobster, sea urchins, a lot of juvenile fish. Because it has this hard substrate on the bottom, it allows for more plant life to grow. So things like seagrasses and some of the marine algae, they require a hard substrate to attach to. And so they can't really survive in the sandy bottom, but once you get to the rocky reef, you start to see a lot more plant life. One of the most common things that you'll see in the rocky reef is the bright orange Garibaldi. The Garibaldi are actually the state marine fish of California, and the males are actually known for being extremely territorial, so they will defend their nests against things that can be much larger than them. Another thing about the Garibaldi is that they served as inspiration for one of La Jolla's most famous residents, Dr. Seuss. Take a moment to ponder this Monterey cypress.
I speak for the trees. Let them grow. Let them grow.
Over by the caves, you'll see a lot of birds. Birds! There are so many birds over there. Pelicans, seagulls, western gulls. And they're a little smelly, but they are an important part of the ecosystem. It is a great vantage point for hunting. The reserve is really productive. There's a lot of bait fish and things that these birds like to eat, so it's really an easy jumping off point for them to get out and get food. The height of the cliffs and the sheer drop of the cliffs makes it easy for birds that don't fly that well, like the cormorants, to glide a little bit farther than they normally would. The cormorants have like a much denser body structure, and that's because they're essentially built to dive, not fly. So they want to have the ability to get deeper in the water to hunt. The trade-off for that is that they don't fly that well. So having a sheer cliff face that's pretty tall allows for the wind to get pushed up the face and allows for them to get back up to their roosting sites, but also allows them to get farther out to sea when they're going out to hunt fish. So around the caves on the north-facing cliff is where you find most of the sea lions. Sea lions are able to use their front flippers to walk. So they can like actually climb up onto rocks, and you can see them using their front flippers for that. Whereas harbor seals, their front flippers are mainly just used for underwater steering. Sea lions also have external ear flaps, whereas harbor seals don't. Sea lions are generally larger and they're kind of a solid brown color, whereas the harbor seals are more spotted and they can be kind of gray. Sea lions also bark, and harbor seals just kind of make cute grunty sounds. Arr! Not like that. It doesn't sound like that at all. So when you're hearing noises coming from the cliffs that sound like they're coming from some kind of seal or sea lion, it's a sea lion. Oh, that was pretty good, right? There is a thing called the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and it's a federal law that says you have to stay a safe distance away from any marine mammal, so that includes the sea lions. And that's a problem that we've been seeing a lot of in La Jolla. Sometimes with the kayaks, but mostly with pedestrians up on the cliffs, like tourists just coming down and hassling the sea lions. And it's a problem for multiple reasons. It puts the human in danger because these are very large animals with teeth that will bite you if you hassle them too much. It's also just having these animals grow accustomed to human interaction is not always the best thing for them or for us. And the more you hassle them, the less rest time they have on the rocks. The reason they're up on the rocks is because they are resting from going on hunting expeditions or things while they're in the water. And if they're constantly being hassled and forced to go back into the water, it can actually negatively impact their health, especially with the increase in human sea lion interactions that we're having in La Jolla. I think it's a great idea to just mention this on tours, like keep your safe distance from these animals. They are wild animals. They can be aggressive, and we're not doing them any favors by interacting with them. A kelp forest is basically like a normal land forest underwater, made up of, in this part of the world, Macrocystis porifera, which is giant kelp. And what happens is it latches onto a rock at the bottom by something called a holdfast, and then it grows extremely quickly up to the surface where it gets sunlight, and it'll actually just keep growing and create this mat that kind of hangs sideways at the surface, but then goes vertically down to the bottom. And the cool thing about kelp forest is it creates structure in the entirety of the water column where there would otherwise be no structure. So when I say structure, I'm talking about all these blades and fronds that are coming from the kelp that create spaces for other animals to live. So in the kelp forest, you find a lot more transient fish species that use the kelp for cover. It's also an important nursery habitat for a lot of juvenile fish species. Because they're generally a little farther offshore, you can get species that are characteristic of more offshore environments. You know, some of our larger shark species you can see in the kelp forest, like the six gills. So the size of the kelp forest is largely dependent on temperature. So during El Nino years, for a variety of reasons, the kelp usually dies back a little bit. Also, El Nino generally brings larger storms, which can tear up the kelp, and that's when we end up seeing a bunch of kelp on the beach. The Submarine Canyon allows even more organisms to be able to live within the reserve. So when the gray whales are migrating from feeding grounds in the north to their mating grounds in Baja and back, they actually come really close into Matlahuayl Reserve because the canyon is right there. It's really deep. Same thing with the dolphins and other marine mammals that people love to see. Between the two reserves that are in this area, there are two separate canyons. And the way that they are situated allows for the really small waves that we experience at the boat launch, which allows us to easily launch kayak tours, but also bigger world-class waves that we see at Black's Beach, which are great for surfing. So just the structure of the canyons under the water allows for these different wave types to propagate into shore. The quick transition from this really deep canyon habitat to a more shallow coastal habitat allows for cold, high nutrient water to get pushed up to the surface, which is really great for things like kelp forest and other plant-based systems. So all four of these distinct habitat types are located within the small area of Matlahuayl State Marine Reserve. The point of an MPA is so that, 10, 20, 30 years from now, someone in La Jolla can still see dolphins 4 out of 7 days of the week and still look out and have that same connection with nature and ocean, and preserve that for future generations. That being said, it's also important for a number of biological reasons and things like that, but I think the human aspect is definitely a strong driver. It really is a magical place. You get a good day where the water's super clear and the weather's amazing and you can just see 50 feet down into the water, which is really rare, but you get that day and it's like, whoa, it's amazing.
WILDCOAST MPA Ambassador Program is here to help businesses like yours by providing the most up-to-date marine protected area information. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. We hope you feel more informed. For more information, you can visit our website at wildcoast.net.